Hello, everyone. Ian Smith here with FedSmith.com, here to talk to you about the 2026 federal pay raise. Is it too early to talk about next year's pay raise? I don't think so. Apparently not, because we're talking about it. The topic's out there, it's floating around, and hard to believe, but we're already halfway through the year. We're into June now. Year will be over before we know it. And honestly, this topic comes up even before now, but it has been picking up some steam here lately. So I thought I'd talk to you about what next year's pay raise is looking like for federal employees, and also to talk to you about pay parity and how that ties into the 2026 raise and why you're likely to hear the pay parity argument this year. So here we go. As of right now, the White House put forth its budget back in May for 2026. It's a budget blueprint, and that typically will kick off part of the pay raise discussion process in the spring when the budget request comes out. And this year's budget request is silent on a pay raise for federal employees in 2026. Most people are assuming that what that means is that the president is not proposing a pay raise for federal employees next year. However, the president and the White House in the budget blueprint have put forth a raise for members of the military of 3.8%. So that's where the pay parity argument comes in. What is pay parity? This is the notion of paying federal employees equal with members of the military in any given year. And the reason it's likely to come up this year is because of this obvious discrepancy between the raises that have been put forth. Assuming they come to fruition, the White House appears to be proposing no pay raise for federal employees next year, and it has proposed a 3.8% raise for members of the military. Some are going to argue this isn't fair. Federal employees are getting shafted, and so they need to be equal to keep it fair. And so it could be an effective argument in a year like this when there's such a glaring discrepancy between the two figures. The groups that you're most likely to hear this argument come from are federal employee unions, since they represent the interests of federal employees, as well as lawmakers. And if you do hear it from any members of Congress, it's likely to be ones who represent the DC metropolitan area, because a lot of federal employees live in that area. They are those lawmakers' constituents, and so they're going to want to curry favor with the voters in that area. As you can probably imagine, this is something that would be even more likely to come up in an election year. Obviously, it's not an election year, but given that this is all part of a political process, it is based on politics, you could see why it might be that way. As an example, last year, there was a group of lawmakers who sent a letter to President Biden in December, and they were pushing him to more than double the 2% raise in 2025 he had proposed for federal employees, to make it equal with the 4.5% raise that was being given to members of the military. Ultimately didn't work out that way. As you know, federal employees got an overall average 2% raise this year. Is pay parity an effective argument? The best way to address that question is to look at historical pay raise figures. I have analyzed data going back to 2003, comparing pay raise figures with members of the military to federal employees. And in that time period, there were 10 years when federal employees had smaller raises than members of the military. There were no years when federal employees had higher pay raises, but there were 13 years when the pay raises were equal. So at least on that basis, it has mixed results, but yeah, it may not be a bad argument, because again, the majority of those years, the figures were equal. I've written an accompanying article that goes with this video that's got that table in it. I'm not going to put it up on the screen here. It's too much data. It would get cluttered in the video, I think. But I will include a link to that article in the description. So if you'd like to take a more in-depth look at that, please check it out. Now, to tie all this together, you've got to look at how the pay raise process works, how it unfolds every year. Like I said, it's midway through the year. We're in June now when I'm recording this. We're already talking about next year's pay raise. The topic, honestly, though, comes up earlier, as I said, sometimes as early as January or February. For instance, there's a bill that was proposed earlier this year by Congressman Jerry Connolly and Senator Brian Schatz from Hawaii. And they put forth a 4.3% raise for federal employees. This is a tradition that the two have every year going back. I've forgotten how many years they've been doing it now. I think it's 9 or 10 years at least. They introduced this bill very early in the year to propose a higher raise for federal employees for the coming year than what they're likely to otherwise get. However, this bill has never become law in all the years it's been introduced. And I'll go ahead and make a prediction now. It's not going to happen this year either, just looking at the historical track record on it. As you probably know, Congressman Connolly passed away recently. I don't know what that will hold for the future of this bill. If somebody steps in his place and it starts being introduced next year about the same time, or perhaps Senator Schatz will introduce it on his own. I don't know. That will be interesting to see what happens with that next year in terms of how it fits into the federal pay raise process. The pay raise is determined each year by a political process. It's not based on an automatic formula, so it can vary from year to year, and it does vary from year to year based on the political climate. It's not to be confused with a COLA. Sometimes I'll hear people refer to the annual pay raise for federal employees as a COLA. It's not, it's different. COLA stands for cost of living adjustment. That only applies to federal retirees, to their annuity payments. That is based on an automatic formula, and it's computed automatically every year based on the cost of living, the CPI. But at any rate, that's a side note. The way the pay raise process unfolds each year is the White House will usually propose a raise early in the year via the budget blueprint. Congress can get involved. They can set a raise that overrides what the president is suggesting by passing legislation. That sometimes happens, but it's not the norm. Usually, whatever the president proposes is what ultimately comes to pass. And then the president in August will issue what's called the alternative pay plan letter. And that's when the proposal for a raise is formalized a bit more. But it doesn't become final until December. The president will issue an executive order formalizing the raise at that point, and that directs the Office of Personnel Management to go ahead and process the raise and issue the pay tables for the coming year, showing what the raise is and how it impacts annual salaries. That's a basic overview of the annual pay raise process, the current status on the 2026 pay raise, and also pay parity and how it ties in to the situation this year. Like I said, given the situation, I think you're likely to hear this argument come up, and that's why, and that's what pay parity is and how it applies here. I hope you found this video helpful. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more updates on this and other topics. When this process unfolds throughout the year and more information becomes available, we'll be posting more videos as well as articles on the fedsmith.com website. So please be sure to check them out. Have a good day.